If you fit into that dress, I'll go to prom with you. Tyler Hamilton's shout echoed across the Riverside High School courtyard like a bomb. The son of the owner of the city's largest car dealership chain held a blood-red size 2 dress, waving it like a trophy in front of more than 200 students who had gathered for lunch. Sophie Chin, 17, felt her world collapse. She was standing there next to the prom registration table, form still in hand, when Tyler appeared with his cruel proposal. The deadly silence that followed was worse than any shouting. It was the kind of silence that precedes a public execution. Seriously, guys, Tyler continued, his voice laden with false generosity, as he flashed the perfect smile he had inherited along with his father's $50 million fortune. Sophie wants to go to the prom so badly that I'm going to give her a chance. If she can fit into this by graduation day, I'll go as her date. Laughter exploded like firecrackers. Cell phones appeared from all sides, some already streaming live on TikTok. Sophie had been known to struggle with her weight for years, and Tyler had chosen a dress that clearly wouldn't even fit at all. "Tyler, stop it," whispered Jessica, one of Sophie's few friends. But her voice was swallowed by the drama-hungry crowd. What those privileged teenagers didn't know was that Sophie Chin wasn't just another insecure girl trying to fit in. Behind her thick glasses and baggy clothes, she hid something Tyler could never buy. An IQ of 156, and hacking skills she had developed at age 12 when she hacked into the school system to find out who was spreading rumors about her. Sophie stared at Tyler, then at the dress, and finally at the crowd of expectant faces. Her mind was already 2 steps ahead, calculating not only how she would fit into that dress, but how Tyler Hamilton would learn that humiliating the wrong person could cost a lot more than any sports car. "I accept," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. The crowd erupted again, but Sophie kept her gaze fixed on Tyler, who blinked a few times, clearly not expecting that response. "Really?" Tyler laughed nervously. "Okay, then you have until the dance. 6 weeks. Let the show begin." As Tyler walked away with his friends, making comments that Sophie pretended not to hear, she carefully folded the dress and put it in her backpack. Her eyes had a serenity that only exists in those who have weathered much worse storms and discovered they have superpowers to survive them all. That afternoon, while the entire school was talking about Sophie's pathetic bet, she was at home sitting in front of 3 monitors typing codes that would take Tyler years to understand. What she was about to discover about the golden boy of Riverside High would make that red dress seem like the least of her problems. If you've ever tasted the bitter taste of public humiliation, and know that sometimes revenge needs to be served with intelligence, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how Sophie turned 6 weeks of hell into 6 weeks of preparation for the most epic comeback that school has ever seen. The video of the humiliation went viral before Sophie even got home. #DressChallenge already had 50,000 views on TikTok, and the comments were a toxic mix of cruel giggles and false words of support. "Poor thing. Someone needs to tell her that's impossible," said one. "Tyler's a jerk, but at least he's being honest," replied another. Tyler, of course, was loving the attention. His Instagram story showed him and his friends at his father's country club drinking protein smoothies while joking about Mission Impossible and Mission Without Return. The boy had turned Sophie's pain into his own personal reality show. "Guys, daily updates on the Sophie project." Tyler shouted into his cell phone camera with that fake influencer energy. "Day 1 and she still hasn't shown up at the gym. I bet she's already given up." His friends laughed like well-fed hyenas. What Tyler didn't know was that Sophie Chen had had a complicated relationship with her own body for years, not out of vanity, but out of necessity for survival. When she was 14, she discovered that her biological father had abandoned the family, not only emotionally, but financially, leaving her Chinese immigrant mother with seemingly endless debt. Sophie began binge eating as a way to cope with the anxiety of watching her mother work 16 hours a day, at 2 jobs, just to keep the tiny apartment they lived in. Every extra pound was a layer of protection against a world that seemed determined to break them. But at age 15, something changed. Sophie discovered she had a rare talent for programming. When she accidentally hacked into the public library system while trying to extend the return date on some books. Instead of getting her in trouble, the librarian, a retired former programmer, recognized her potential and began teaching her everything about code, systems, and networks. "Knowledge is power, Sophie," he always said. "And power well used can move mountains." 3 years later, Sophie was not only the best science student in school, she was a ghostwriter of systems for small local businesses, earning enough money to give her mother her first vacation in years. Her fingers could do more on a keyboard than Tyler could do with all his father's fortune. While Tyler posted yet another video mocking her, now imitating what Sophie parading at the prom would look like, she was immersed in something much more interesting: the Hamilton family's digital records. It wasn't hard to find loopholes in the system of a family that trusted money more than digital security. Tyler used Tyler the King 123 as his password for just about everything, including his access to his father's corporate email. How touching! In 2 hours of careful browsing, Sophie discovered that Hamilton Motors wasn't exactly the ethical empire it appeared to be. There were records of cars with safety issues being sold without proper repairs. Employees fired for trying to report irregularities. And most interestingly, Tyler had destroyed 3 cars in drunk driving accidents. But Dad always managed to resolve the situation before it reached the courts. "Interesting," Sophie muttered, saving everything to encrypted drives. "Very interesting." At school, Tyler intensified his campaign of humiliation. He created a countdown on Instagram. 41 days to the miracle, and began posting diet tips sarcastically directed at Sophie. His followers loved the cruelty disguised as humor. "Guys, maybe we should start a support group for our friend Sophie," Tyler announced in the cafeteria loud enough for everyone to hear, like Eaters Anonymous or something. The laughter that followed was like a collective slap in the face. Sophie kept her eyes on her plate, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel like disappearing. Instead, she felt something growing inside her, a calculating coldness that would be very familiar to any experienced programmer. It was the same feeling you get when you find a critical bug in the system. First, you understand the problem, then you plan the solution, and finally, you execute the patch that will solve everything at once. That afternoon, while Tyler celebrated another 100,000 views on the humiliation video, Sophie was at home doing something that would completely change the game. She wasn't just researching diets or exercises. She was building a digital dossier that would teach Tyler Hamilton the difference between confidence and arrogance in the most painful way possible. Each new cruel post from Tyler only fueled something inside her that her privileged peers couldn't see. The quiet determination of someone who had discovered that true strength doesn't come from muscles or money, but from well-used information. What those spoiled teenagers didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing their own sentence of defeat. Line by line, post by post. 2 weeks had passed since the initial humiliation, and Tyler was more confident than ever. Her daily stories about Project Sophie had become a phenomenon at school. Even students from other classes began following the saga to see how it would end. "Hey guys, updates!" Tyler shouted at the camera every day. "Sophie has disappeared from the gym I pay for her to attend. I think reality has hit." What Tyler didn't know was that Sophie had never set foot in that elite gym. Instead, she had found something much better and much cheaper. Marcus Rivera, a 28-year-old computer technician who worked part-time at the school, had noticed Sophie's extraordinary skills during a computer class. "You hacked the school system in less than 5 minutes, Marcus murmured, watching Sophie bypass all the security blocks as if they were made of paper. "That should be impossible." Technically, It wasn't hacking, Sophie corrected without taking her eyes off the screen. It was social engineering combined with exploiting known vulnerabilities. Quite different. Marcus laughed. A former soldier, who had lost his left leg in Afghanistan. He recognized talent when he saw it. More importantly, he recognized injustice when he witnessed it. Tyler Hamilton is a privileged jerk, he said bluntly. If you want to destroy him digitally, I can teach you a few things you won't learn from YouTube tutorials. That's how Sophie gained not only a mentor, but an ally with connections Tyler would never suspect. Marcus knew every system in the school, every camera, every security protocol. Better yet, he had friends in strategic places, former military colleagues who now worked in digital security, private investigation, and even some government agencies. First lesson, Marcus said, setting up 3 computers in an abandoned room in the school basement that officially didn't exist on the maps. Digital revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience, precision, and most importantly, always having 3 backup plans. While Tyler posted more videos mocking Sophie's quitting, she was learning techniques for system penetration, digital forensics, and something that would change the whole game. How to track financial transactions through seemingly anonymous blockchains. Tyler Hamilton Jr. has a cryptocurrency wallet, Marcus revealed, pointing to data on the screen. He thinks he's being clever, laundering money from the tips he gets from Daddy to keep his mouth shut about the accidents. Sophie felt her heart race. It wasn't just about cars wrecked by drunk driving. Tyler was actively receiving money to keep family secrets. How much money in the last 2 years? About $800,000. All in Bitcoin, all anonymous, all traceable if you know where to look. The plan Sophie was putting together wasn't just about wearing a red dress. It was about systematically dismantling Tyler Hamilton's digital life in a way that would make his father question whether it was worth protecting a son who could bring the whole family down. At school, the situation had become even more toxic. Tyler had convinced some of the most popular athletes to participate in his motivational campaign for Sophie. They started leaving candy and fast food in her locker with loving notes like, "We thought you were hungry," and a few more, "and you won't even fit in a circus tent." "Sophie, this is getting serious," Jessica murmured over lunch, watching Tyler and his friends laugh loudly at a nearby table. "Maybe you should just accept that this dress thing is impossible and move on." But Sophie just smiled, the same calm smile her mother had learned to recognize and fear. It was the smile that appeared when Sophie discovered a critical flaw in a complex system. "Jess, have you ever heard of just poetry?" "Justy, what?" "Just as poetry. It's when you use someone's own arrogance as a tool to destroy them." Tyler is so busy humiliating the fat and ugly Sophie that he hasn't realized there's another Sophie, one he should be very afraid to meet. That afternoon, while Tyler celebrated 500,000 views on his latest video, Sophie gives up. The saga ends sooner than expected. Sophie was doing something that would completely change the rules of the game. She wasn't just gathering information about Tyler. She was planting little digital footprints that would make it look like he was creating his own destruction. "Every cruel post he makes, every story mocking you," Marcus explained, watching Sophie work on multiple screens simultaneously, "is creating a documented pattern of behavior that will be used against him when the bomb drops." Sophie paused, staring at her own reflection in the dark screen. In 4 weeks, she had lost 26 pounds. Not through crazy diets or expensive supplements, but through the oldest method in the world, hard work and relentless determination. Marcus had put together a customized military exercise regimen that she followed religiously every day at 5 a.m. before school. "You know, you could already fit into the dress, right?" Marcus commented, observing Sophie's physical transformation. "From what I've researched about that specific model, you've been the right size for a week now." Sophie smiled again, but this time there was something different in her eyes. A calculating coldness that would make any veteran hacker proud. Marcus, this was never about the dress. The dress is just the stage. Tyler Hamilton is going to learn that there are consequences for treating people like disposable entertainment. She turned to the computers where dozens of windows displayed bank accounts, private conversations, real-time location, and something that would give Tyler nightmares if he knew. A complete dossier on every person who laughed that day in the courtyard, including secrets they thought were buried forever. The question isn't whether I can fit into the dress, Sophie murmured, her fingers dancing across the keyboards with the precision of a virtuoso pianist. The question is whether Tyler will be able to keep his expensive clothes when he discovers that underestimating the wrong person costs much more than any designer dress. While Tyler slept peacefully in his mansion, believing he had broken the spirit of yet another loser, Sophie worked late into the night, building something he could never buy or escape, a web of digital consequences that would turn every cruel laugh into evidence against him, every arrogant post into a public confession, and every moment of humiliation imposed on her into her own sentence of social and financial destruction. It was when everyone laughed that something unexpected began to take shape. Not only in Sophie's quiet determination, but mainly in the surgical precision with which she was documenting every second of cruelty to use as ammunition in the war Tyler had unwittingly declared against someone he didn't know he was fighting. Prom night arrived like a perfect storm. The Riverside Country Club was decorated with golden lights and arrangements that cost more than Sophie's mother's annual salary. Tyler Hamilton paraded around in his $3,000 tuxedo, smiling for the cameras of proud parents, completely oblivious to the digital hurricane that was about to devastate his life. "Guys, today is the day," Tyler shouted to his stories, surrounded by friends. "Operation Impossible dress comes to an end. Sophie obviously didn't show up, so technically I won the bet without even trying." What Tyler didn't know was that Sophie had arrived 2 hours ago, but not through the main gate. Marcus had smuggled her in through the back, using the security system he knew, like the back of his hand. She was in the club's control center, connected to all the sound systems, big screens, and most importantly, all the cameras broadcasting the event live to parents who couldn't attend. "Final check," Marcus murmured into the communicator. "Are you sure about this? Once you press that button, there's no turning back." Sophie looked at her own image on the monitor. The red dress fit perfectly. Her hair was impeccable. And for the first time in years, she felt truly powerful. Marcus Tyler Hamilton turned my pain into public entertainment. Now it's my turn to turn his truth into a public nightmare. In the main hall, Tyler was toasting with champagne when the screens displaying photos of the graduates began to flicker strangely. "Technical difficulties," muttered the DJ, fiddling with the equipment. Suddenly, all the screens displayed a single image. Sophie Chin, stunning in her red dress, smiling directly at the camera. "Good evening, Riverside High." Her voice echoed through the speakers with crystal clarity. "Tyler Hamilton, you said that if I fit into this dress, you would go to the dance with me. Well, here I am." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler dropped his champagne glass, the liquid spilling across the marble floor like a puddle of materialized guilt. 200 teenagers and their parents turned to him, waiting for a reaction. "But before I hold you to that promise," Sophie continued, her voice now laden with a coldness that made several attendees shiver, "I think you should get to know the man who made that bet a little better." "Tyler, do you remember these emails?" The first screen displayed Tyler's WhatsApp conversations with friends planning how to break Sophie psychologically and make her drop out of school. The second screen showed bank transfers. $50,000 in Bitcoin from Hamilton Motors to Tyler's personal account, marked guaranteed silence. December incident. "Tyler Hamilton Jr. isn't just a high school bully," Sophie explained methodically, as new evidence appeared on the screens. "He's an active accomplice in a family money laundering scheme that includes covering up drunk driving accidents." The third screen showed photos of 3 completely destroyed cars, followed by police reports that had been mysteriously filed away after substantial donations from a Hamilton family to police funds. Tyler was white as a sheet, desperately trying to reach the sound equipment. "Turn it off. Turn it off now." But Marcus had isolated all systems. Nothing could interrupt the broadcast. "And here's my favorite part." Sophie smiled coldly. "Tyler, do you remember Amber Rodriguez? The 16-year-old girl you ran over last December when you left the Christmas party drunk?" A new image appeared. Amber in a wheelchair, smiling bravely at the camera despite her visible scars. "Amber is alive, but she'll never walk again. And Tyler, your father paid her family $200,000 to keep quiet while you continue driving as if nothing had happened." Chaos erupted in the hall. Parents started screaming. Some students were crying, others were frantically filming. Tyler tried to run, but found that all the exits were blocked. A security protocol activated by Marcus. Tyler Hamilton. Sophie appeared live, descending the club's main staircase like a queen returning to claim her throne. "You turned my humiliation into a viral sensation. Now, let me explain what real virality is." She stopped in front of him, and for the first time in weeks, Tyler really saw her. Not the insecure girl he had humiliated, but a force of nature he had completely underestimated. "Your conversations, your bank transfers, your father's bribes, everything has already been sent to the FBI, to the local press, and most importantly, to the 2.3 million followers watching this live stream right now." Tyler fell to his knees, literally. "Sophie, please, you don't understand. My father will kill me. My family. Your family." Sophie laughed, but there was no cruelty in her laughter, just cold, calculated justice. "Tyler, your family built an empire on victims like Amber. You bought silence. You bought justice. You bought impunity. But there's one thing money can't buy. The courage of someone who has nothing left to lose." Police sirens could already be heard outside. Marcus had ensured that all the evidence was handed over simultaneously to multiple authorities, eliminating any possibility of another cover-up. "By the way," Sophie added, adjusting the dress that fit her perfectly. "Thanks for the motivation. These last 2 months have been the best of my life. I've discovered that I'm much stronger, smarter, and more capable than anyone, including myself, could have imagined." As Tyler was escorted away by the police amid camera flashes and shouts from reporters, Sophie remained in the center of the hall, surrounded by colleagues who finally saw her for who she really was. Not a victim, but an unstoppable force of nature. But Tyler Hamilton's story was just beginning to unravel. And what would happen in the coming days would prove that underestimating Sophie Chen would be remembered as the most costly mistake a privileged family had ever made in Riverside history. Because when you awaken a dragon disguised as a lamb, the resulting fire burns much more than just reputations. 6 months after the prom that turned into a national nightmare, Sophie Chen was exactly where she should have always been, in the spotlight, but for the right reasons. The MIT classroom was packed for her presentation on digital ethics and social justice. Part of the full scholarship program she had received after her story went viral for all the right reasons. "Technology is not neutral," Sophie explained to an audience of 300 future engineers, her steady voice echoing through the auditorium. "It amplifies who we choose to be. We can use it to humiliate or to humanize, to destroy or to build." In the front row, Marcus smiled proudly beside Sophie's mother, who had finally quit her 3 jobs to pursue the nursing degree she had always dreamed of. Sophie's book, Code of Revenge: How I Turned Humiliation into Revolution, had been on the bestseller list for 4 consecutive weeks. Meanwhile, Tyler Hamilton Jr. discovered that a lost reputation cannot be regained with family money. Expelled from Riverside High, Rejected by 7 different universities, he now attended a community technical school where no one was impressed by surnames or parents' bank accounts. Hamilton Motors had gone completely bankrupt after investigations revealed decades of systematic corruption. Tyler Sr. was serving a 12-year sentence for bribery, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. The mansion was auctioned off to pay compensation to victims, including Amber Rodriguez, who used the money to start a foundation to support victims of traffic accidents. "You ruined my life," Tyler had written in one of dozens of desperate messages he sent Sophie in the first few months. She never replied to any of them, but she kept them all, not as trophies, but as reminders that words can hurt, but only if you let them. At school, the change was noticeable. Bullying had virtually disappeared after everyone saw what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. Jessica, Sophie's former friend, now worked as a volunteer moderator for anti-cyberbullying campaigns. Inspired by the example of courage she had witnessed, Sophie turned pain into power, the school principal commented in an interview with the local newspaper. She proved that the best response to cruelty is not more cruelty, but irrefutable excellence. The red dress was never worn again. Sophie donated it to a charity auction that raised $75,000 for digital inclusion programs in public schools. She no longer needed it. She had discovered that true power does not come from how you look on the outside, but from how you choose to react when the world tries to break your spirit. In her latest Instagram story, Sophie posted a simple photo, her programming in her dorm room at MIT with the caption, "A year ago, someone tried to convince me that I didn't deserve to be here. Today, I realized he was right. I deserve so much more." Tyler occasionally saw these posts on his broken phone, always followed by thousands of supportive comments and messages from young people. Sophie had inspired around the world. He had learned too late that there is a difference between confidence and arrogance, between real power and inherited privilege. The real irony was that Tyler had finally learned humility, not on his own merits, but because Sophie taught him that some lessons can only be learned through consequences. While she built a bright future on the ashes of her own humiliation, he tried to rebuild an identity that had never truly been his. Sophie Chin proved that the most devastating revenge is not to destroy your enemy. It is to become so extraordinary that they become completely irrelevant. She turned a red dress into a symbol of resistance, a programming code into a weapon of social justice, and her own pain into fuel for change that impacted thousands of lives. The lesson she taught an entire generation was simple. When someone tries to make you feel small, don't stoop to their level. Grow so tall that they have to break their neck to try to see you. Because the best revenge is not to become like those who hurt you. It's to become everything they could never be. If this story of transformation and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs to remember that no humiliation is a match for true determination. Leave a comment if you face similar situations and how you reacted. Remember, dignity is not asked for. It is earned through irrefutable excellence.